All right. Well, good afternoon, good evening. For those of you who are joining live, welcome. And again, feel free to use that chat feature if you have questions along the way. But today, I kind of wanted to give an inspirational talk about what you really need to start an obesity practice. And really, my goal is not that I'm going to give you all the answers because I think you already have most of the answers or can find them other places. What I find that most people are really lacking when they're thinking about starting a practice is a few things. And we're going to talk about what those are today. Hopefully, you'll leave feeling more confident that this is an option for you and what that might look like. So, for those of you who have not met me before, I'm Dr. Carolyn Francavilla. I'm a family physician by training. And I knew I wanted to do obesity medicine or bariatric medicine, as it was called when I discovered it. And so while I was in my residency training, I actually did a lot of rotations in obesity medicine and I started thinking about starting an obesity practice. I took my obesity boards immediately after my family medicine boards. And I did find a small to medium-sized practice that was willing to hire me to do obesity medicine. More than a decade ago, there really was no obesity jobs. And so they hired me to do that within the context of family medicine. But I quickly realized that it was not going to be a long-term fit for me and that I needed to go back to this idea of starting my own practice. And so a year after residency and 7 months pregnant, I started my own practice with a partner. I had just bought a house. I had all my med school debt that I was starting to repay. And I had to take on even more debt to start this practice. And so that was sort of an overwhelming thing in some ways, but I also knew it was the only way that I was going to be able to practice medicine on my own terms. And so one of the first challenges I hear from people when they think about starting a practice is financial challenges that they can't afford it. In my case, I think the fact that I had to make money, I had to pay for this house that I just bought, I had to pay for this baby I just had. My spouse did not have enough income to cover our expenses with his job alone. Is I had to be successful, and so you absolutely can be successful in your own practice. And I think again, that's one of the first challenges I'll hear from people is they're like, oh, but like I have kids, or I need the income, and to me, those are just pressures that force you to be successful and build your practice quickly. So a few months after I started my practice, I had my first baby, kind of grew the practice a little bit, had a second baby. And then in 2020, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, I bought the practice. I took over the practice from my partner and became the sole owner of the practice. And that is honestly when things really took off for me, when I became the sole owner and the director of my own fate and had to figure out how to survive throughout COVID, that I really, really developed a lot more business skills and strategic thinking and have really grown and had a very flourishing practice. I also decided I wanted to do more than just have my practice. And so I launched my platform, Help Your Patients Lose Weight, which has courses and coaching and masterminds for obesity practices. 2023, I wanted to have a bigger influence in the world. So I started a podcast, continued to keep growing the practice. We now have 5 physicians who work here and 1 nurse practitioner. And then this year I was named the OMA Clinician of the Year. So, feel like I've just had a really amazing career trajectory. And I do feel like having a private practice is what allowed me to have so much career satisfaction, help so many people, and even help other clinicians to practice medicine on their own terms, both as employees at my clinic, but also I've helped probably about 100 physicians at this point start their own practices. So thank you for joining me today. And again, I hope that I can encourage you that if I can do this, you can do this. Again, 7 months pregnant, right out of residency when I started my practice. I promise you can, if you want to, start your own practice. So where I always start with coaching, either individual consults or my mastermind groups, is determining your why for the practice. This to me is really the key to success. So your why ends up being sort of your core value, and it is so key for when you are trying to make choices for your business and when you are trying to figure out if you are meeting your goals for your business. So, when you're thinking about starting a practice, why is having your own practice important to you? What is your goal from creating this practice? And again, this is what I always go back to when things get tough, when I'm not sure on certain days. If I want to run the practice today, started off as one of those days, but it recovered well because I have a great team and they saved the day. So when you're trying to answer this question about what your why is, you kind of say like, well, why do you want to start this practice? And you may immediately get to the right answer, but sometimes you have to dig deeper. And so for me, it was really wanting to do things on my own terms. And so then it's like, well, why is that important? Well, because I want to treat patients the way they deserve to be treated. Why is that important? Well, I trained really hard and I feel like I really have a lot of great tools in my toolbox. And I think I have a really great way to help people. And I'm not being allowed to do that in some of these other environments. So those were some of the discussions for myself when I was going through this. Yours may be totally different. Yours may be I'm not getting paid enough. I have more value than what I'm getting paid in this current thing. I think I can do more on my own. Maybe it's more wanting more flexibility in your life. Maybe you're sick of working 5 days a week. Well, why is that important? Well, I want to spend more time with my kids. I want to spend more time traveling. I feel too stressed and I'm not taking care of my own health. Well, why is that important? Well, I want to practice what I preach. I want to have a healthy life that's balanced that I tell my patients to have. So you kind of keep digging on these whys until you get to this place where you're like, okay, this is it. This is my centering reason of why I have this practice. And so there is no right or wrong. If it's because you want to make $1 million a year, good, you do you. If it's because you want to help the underserved, great, you do you. If it's because you only want to work 2 days a week, great, you do you. You're going to come to whatever that reason is on your own. And it doesn't matter what it is. You just need to know what it is for you. So for me, mine always came back to autonomy. And when I talk to clinicians who are starting their practices or have had a practice for many years, autonomy is a really common one. And again, for me, that was practicing obesity medicine in a time where no one had any idea what that was or why I wanted to do it. I wanted to give really, really high quality care. I was just talking to one of the doctors in my clinic, and we were talking about a patient that came from another obesity clinic. And she was like, I felt like they kind of missed a lot of stuff and like maybe you should have done some other stuff. And I was like, yeah, well, we spend a lot of time with our patients because we value that here, right? And then work-life balance. Again, that comes down to autonomy. If I want to decide to like not see patients after 3 p.m. and do a lecture like this instead, I have that choice. And so autonomy really was my core value. Other things that can help you tease this out is just spending some time figuring out what you want your life to look like. And you may be joining me in this presentation and be like, wait, I thought we were talking about like what you need to do to start a private practice. This is the groundwork. This is your foundation. If you don't know why you're doing this, what you want it to look like, you're not going to have a practice that serves your needs. You're not going to be satisfied with it. And if you're trying to escape burnout or you're trying to have more professional satisfaction, if you don't think through these things, you're not going to get it from a private practice. You need to make this practice be on your terms. And before you can do that, you need to know what your terms are. So, what do you want your life to look like a year from now? What do you want your life to look like 5 years from now? What do you want it to look like 10 years from now? And what do you want it to look like 20 years from now? I have to be honest, folks, I overshot. My life is what I wanted it to look like in 20 years, and I did it in 10. So now I'm in a really exciting place where I get to figure out what else I want to do, what I want to do next. But if I didn't have that really, really clear vision going into this of what I was building towards, I would have never been able to get there. And if you try to get this advice from just sort of traditional business people, they're going to give you advice about your practice that's all numbers based, right? What your profitability should be, how many patients you should be seeing, how busy your day should be, how many no-shows are appropriate. They're going to give you all these metrics, and those are important. You have to have business sense with your practice. You have to be able to do those things. But if you look at it strictly from that business point of view, you're really going to be missing out on some of the reasons why you went into private practice and where some of like the joy and power of being your own boss can really come from. So, a quote I always love is comparison is the thief of joy. Again, when I started this practice, people gave me a lot of advice of what I should do. We had a biller in the beginning because we take insurance, and she looked at our numbers, maybe 6 months in, and she said, well, it looks like, you guys are starting to do pretty good. Here's your collections. She's like, now you just have to see more patients. And my partner and I were like, how do you know we need to see more patients? Number one, you don't know what our overhead is. So you don't know what our profit is, and you don't know what our goal is. Maybe you think we should be making $300,000 a year. we're okay making less than that. We don't want to work 50 hours a week. We want to work 25 and see people for longer visits and get to know them. And we're happy with where it is. So comparison is the thief of joy. I look around right now and there are some people doing really, really cool things with their practice. And sometimes I think, man, I'd like to do that, right? I've always wanted to have a gym associated with my practice, and I have colleagues that are doing that, and it looks so cool. And then I really think about if that is how I want to invest my time and my money. And honestly, that's not the right fit for me right now. And so, what is a good fit for me is getting to do lots of teaching, which I love to do, getting to partner with gyms in my community, and doing what works for my family and my practice. So, again, there is no one right way to have your practice. You just need to know why you're doing this, what your goals are, and then you can make your practice fit those goals. Okay, so congrats. You are now the CEO of your practice. Maybe you're not quite there yet. Maybe you're just thinking about it. But when you start your practice, you are in charge of a lot. You're the CEO. And if you don't have a big team, you are in charge of operations, marketing, finance, human resource, my least favorite thing, business development, and you are still a doctor on top of it too, right? So that was my day today. I was troubleshooting some things. I was interviewing some new people. I was giving an evaluation to someone. And then I was also still seeing patients before and after that. And so it can be a lot. And I think that can feel really overwhelming to people. But again, there's that autonomy component where you get to choose how you're doing that and make the rules for yourself. And that can make it totally worth it. So there is this huge sense with physicians that they need an MBA to run a business. And I am just going to challenge that for you. I want you to think about some successful small businesses in your community. These may be like I think of the dry cleaner that I went to yesterday that I've been going to for 16, 17 years, owned by a family. English is their second language. She asked me how to spell brown every time I come in, and she has a successful business. It's paying her bills, it's paying for her home, and she's been able to keep it for at least the 16 years that I've been in the community. That is a successful small business. It's still around, it's paying her bills, it's taking care of her. Um, these people who run small businesses in your community, maybe it's a chiropractic office, maybe it's a liquor store, maybe, I mean, there's so many small businesses, a restaurant, right? Most of the people running these small businesses in your community, they don't have MBAs. They may not have college degrees. They may not have a high school degree. And English may not even be their second language. They may not even be proficient at English. And yet they're still able to run a successful business. So, no, you don't need an MBA to run a business. In some ways, running a business is kind of simple. Now, if you're going to have a giant billion-dollar company, yeah, you probably should have an MBA or some MBAs working for you. But you're probably not going to have a billion-dollar enterprise at your obesity practice, right? You're going to be in the 100,000 to maybe $1 million range to be depending on how big this practice gets. And you do not need an MBA to be successful. So I want to encourage you that as a physician, or if you're a nurse practitioner or PA listening to this, you are already highly skilled. You are highly trained. You have lots of problem solving skills. You have leadership skills. You have troubleshooting skills. And you can absolutely run a business with the knowledge you already have and support from others. So this is my favorite quote. This is from me. It's what I always like to say. Business is simple. You have to do two things. Make a profit. This is key. If you don't make a profit eventually with your business, hopefully within a few months, definitely within a year or two, it's not really a business. It's a hobby, right? This is just something you're investing a lot of money and time into and you're not getting a profit from. So your business at some point needs to make a profit. And you should never break the law to achieve number one. People have been struggling with this the last couple of years in the obesity industry. There's lots of law breaking going on, in my opinion. But make a profit and don't break the law to get there. It's as simple as that. I swear, you might be thinking like, this is nuts. This lady's oversimplifying it. But that really is the essence of your business is what do you have to do to make money? Sometimes those are tough choices. Sometimes that's firing an employee that's costing you too much. Sometimes that is seeing more patients in a day because that's the only way you're going to make money. Sometimes it is downgrading your office space. The financial choices will be there, and you just have to say what makes money while not breaking the law. Now, there are going to be lots of other variables, and I have this whole paradigm that I sort of use on how to solve problems that come up in your business. But these are going to be the first two steps when you go through that paradigm is what is it going to do financially? Is this a sound financial decision? Does it help us be profitable? And is it like a legal option? And then from there, is it in line with your values? Is it in line with the direction the company is going? Does it make sense for your patients? Does it make sense for you? There's lots of other variables, but these are like the core two things to running a business. And I like to make it that simple because it makes it a lot less overwhelming. All the MBA, all the business jargon, make a profit, don't break the law to get there. So, my little legally blonde quote, like what? Like it's hard, but I think go in with that attitude. Doctors get bamboozled a lot by people who want to charge you tons of money to help set up your practice or help you with marketing. And they make it seem like because they have these degrees that they're the only ones who can do it. You do not need a business degree to run a business. In fact, most businesses in this country are run by people who do not have formal business training. Okay. What you probably are going to need over time is a team. And this is definitely a growth thing, and this will happen at different phases for different people. But in general, even if you're a micro practice and you're doing a lot on your own, you probably should not be doing everything on your own. So, for example, with operations, once you get bigger, you will have like a manager on your team. I hired an office manager a little more than 2 years ago. Phenomenal, has changed my life. She's really my right-hand man and lets me be a true executive and not have to manage everything my own. Lawyers, can feel frustrating to work with for some people, but once they save your butt once or twice and write you a great contract or give you great helpful advice, you will realize that paying them $500 or $800 an hour is totally worth it. So lawyers will help you with operations. They can save you so much time and stress. You can hire a chief operating officer. You can often hire a fractional one, so one that works for you 10 hours a week and does some of those duties as you get bigger. Marketing, you can hire people to do this. You can hire online services. You can hire virtual assistants. You may love marketing and do a lot of it yourself. You may outsource all of it. Finance. Some people like to do a lot of this their own, like to do their own bookkeeping and their own accounting. I've always done a little bit of my own bookkeeping because it's really important to know what your numbers are, see where money's coming from, see where money's going. But you probably want a professional who is doing your taxes and maybe your formal books. So I have someone who formally does my bookkeeping for tax purposes, and of course, an accountant who does all my tax stuff. And they're an advisor throughout the year too, right? I get something weird in the mail. I call my accountant and they walk me through it and take care of it. And just spending a little bit of time or money with them is totally worth it. They solve a lot of problems. You can hire a chief financial officer. You can also hire fractional CFOs, so someone who does this for a small portion for your business and helps you analyze the finances if that's something that has gotten complicated for your practice or that you don't understand. Your financial planner, you may already have one that you use for personal finances. They may be able to help you on the business side too. Mine has helped me some with thinking ahead and how to use some of my capital. Bankers, this is actually something I have not really utilized, but a lot of my colleagues have, and if I were to grow or need financing, would probably utilize these services more. But bankers can help you plan and figure out if loans or lines of credit or what sort of funding makes the most sense for your practice as you start or grow. Human resources, there's actually a lot of these that are available through medical societies. The AMA has put out a lot. I helped with a little bit of their resources in some of these categories. So that is a place. My local medical society, my state medical society have been really, really helpful. And actually, even my malpractice insurance, which is Copic here in Colorado, is awesome. They've helped me with that too. Lawyers can help you with this. You can have a part-time HR specialist if you need something like that as your practice grows too. But HR to me is one of the most stressful ones. And again, just lean on the resources that are out there. You don't have to know it all. And then business development. You may want to hire a coach as you grow your business. I have done that multiple times in my practice. And I think that, knowing when you need help or support or someone to help you think outside the box is really, really helpful. So having coaches, you have resources through things like the American Medical Association, your state medical societies, your specialty society, and then peer support, connecting with peers. I love many of the Facebook groups that are out there. And then I have created some peer support groups as well for people that interact with me. Problem solving. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and I'm just going to do a superficial cover of this topic today. But again, I have kind of a paradigm that I teach in my mastermind and occasionally when I lecture elsewhere. But number one, please have the confidence to know that as a physician, you are highly trained, and most of the problems that come up in your business, you have the mind to solve. So we solve problems all day in our clinic, right? We're getting a history, we're making a diagnosis, we're interpreting labs, and we're doing the same thing with our business. We're taking the information and we're looking at what could be an explanation, what could be a possible solution, and then we're just picking the best solution. So it's actually really similar to what we do as a physician when we're seeing a patient. This is where I really emphasize knowing your why, having that core value for your practice is really, really key. And then you layer on making sure it's a profitable or at least financially sound decision and making sure it's a legally sound decision. If you're not sure, that's what your lawyer is for, because there's lots of somewhat annoying laws in medicine, like, Stark laws and HIPAA and things like that. And so you want to make sure that the choices you're making are compliant and legally sound. But knowing that why is going to help you make choices for the practice that makes sense for you and your practice. People might make different choices in the same situation. And then again, I can't emphasize enough, you don't have to do all of this on your own. There are experts that you can consult with when you can't figure out something on your own, and you absolutely should. So I'm a family physician, right? I'm very comfortable with consulting. I was talking to a hand surgeon earlier this week for a patient of mine who had an infection in her hand. Knowing when you need to get that expert opinion. We're used to that in medicine, right? We know what we can do, and we know when we don't have the skill set and that we should get advice from someone else in order to make the next best choice. So this is my family's motto, find a way or make a way. And if you've not heard an expression like this before, maybe you will want to make this something you utilize in your life. But to me, this is a mindset of there is always a solution. Everything has some solution. Sometimes you may not like the solution. Maybe it costs money. Maybe it's uncomfortable. Maybe it's hard, but there is always a solution. I also joke in life, I'm sure you've all heard this expression, but there's problems money can solve and problems money can't, right? And so with your business, that it's going to be the same. There is a solution to everything. And if you were determined to be successful and you have that important why that is backing you, you will find a way to make your practice be successful. I'm a huge believer in setting goals, and these are really important for your practice. So, our SMART goals, which I'm sure you've learned about in your training before, are things that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time sensitive. And so, on a somewhat regular basis, whether that's quarterly or yearly for your business, setting some goals and then having a way to follow up on them. So, what I encourage people with my coaching and my consulting is, having a business meeting with yourself. If there's no employees yet, you might just be meeting to check in on these goals with yourself. If you have employees, you might check in with them on a regular basis, but having that routine of having a regular business meeting to check in on how things are going and if things are going the way you want them. And then achieving goals, again, this is where you need to kind of have these times set aside. You can't just do patient care and not focus on the business at all. You need some time to look and see what is happening with the business trajectory. Do things like a SWOT analysis, look at those goals, look at the finances, and you do need to set some time aside to do those things when you're starting and growing a practice. So moving on to talk about marketing. So I was just at the AMA meeting a couple weeks ago, and we launched a private practice incubator, which I'm so excited that the AMA is doing. And in one of the more senior physicians who's helped a lot of practices was talking about kind of like the steps you take when starting your practice. And it was like, your business plan, which is important, and your funding, and like, setting up HR and setting up practice, all these things. And at the very end was marketing. And I was like, no, no, no. Marketing is where you start. So if you have even a thought in your head that you may someday, at any point in the future, want your own practice, you should start marketing right now. A lot of people don't know what marketing is. So marketing is not just advertising. That is a component of marketing, but marketing is really this long-term building of a relationship with your potential customer or your community. And so that can be lots of different things that are included in marketing, but marketing is not just about selling. Selling is like focused on a goal. Like, you're going to see this ad and then you're going to click and you're going to buy. Marketing is much more big picture. So it might be well, we'll talk about some of the things that include marketing. So marketing is big picture. It might include advertising, it might include selling things, but marketing is a very big picture thing. And again, it's not too early to start marketing at any point because you always want to build that reputation, have people know who you are. If nobody knows your business exists, they can't go to it. And so if you wait till you have everything else together and then, you have your clinic built and you have your furniture and you have your EHR set up and then you start advertising, you have wasted a lot of time because your clinic is not going to be full the first day you advertise. But if you have spent weeks, months, years building a following of people who could be potential customers, then once you are ready to have a product for them, then they're ready to sign up and be your patient, right? So you want people to know you exist before you try to get the practice going, if at all possible. So, marketing is just creating a relationship with your customer and your community. And it can look lots of ways. It can include your website, your social media presence, the network you do, the people you know, the reputation you've built for yourself or your practice, thought leadership. So, being known again in your community or your specialty, being involved in community events, which can be really fun. And it can include things like, paid advertisements or paid campaigns. So, kind of wrapping up here, this ended up being quick, but I wanted to save time for Q&A, so that's perfect. What do you really need to start a practice? There are lots of other specific things, but first you need confidence. You can run a business. You have done harder things if you became a doctor than running a business. You can absolutely run a business. You just have to focus on making sure it's profitable and the math makes sense and that you are following the rules. Knowing your why, this is going to center you. This is going to guide your decisions. It's going to keep you going off tough days. And it is going to be clear what your mission is when you know what your why is. And then finally, marketing. It is never too early to market, to build your reputation, to build your knowledge, your influence in the field so that people trust you, know who you are before you are even advertising your clinic. Always helpful to have that going. So, of course, there are lots of other things. We can talk about profit and loss statements. We can talk more about HR. We can talk more about logistics of finding space and picking an EHR and all these little nitty-gritty things of business. But when you have the confidence that you can do this, you know why you are doing this, and you have some influence, you have some market, some presence in the world, you are set up to start an obesity practice. So there you have it. Those are the three things I think you really need as a foundation to start your practice. But I'm going to open to any questions you have about how to start or run your business. And before we get that, oh yeah, I have a couple things to tell you. So I do have a mastermind starting your practice. This is going to be, I think, the fifth or sixth month mastermind that I have run to help you start or grow your obesity practice. So if you are thinking about one, if you already have it going, if you're in the planning phases, all of those work for this. We have monthly sessions for 6 months, and then you have contact through some virtual ways for support. And then you also get access to all my course materials with that. I just launched because the first mastermind was so popular and people kept asking for like a level two mastermind. So if you're listening to this and you're like actually have a really successful practice already and you just want some more peer support, there's that option. I do one-on-one consults. Those are super, super efficient. You send me all your questions beforehand. We spend an hour. You can see I talk fast. We answer everything we possibly can in that hour. Lots of people have started a practice just from that consult. And then I also have, if you want a lot more support, 6 months of one-on-one support and counseling. So if you want my help starting your practice, if the encouragement wasn't enough and you need more details, you can find me at Help Your Patients Lose Weight or Dr. Francavilla. And then now I will go ahead and take any questions if you guys want to pop those in the Q&A. I see one there. Okay. Oh, it says chat is disabled, but then someone else was able to put something in there. Oh, it's in the Q&A. I'm sorry that the chat is disabled. Sorry. Put it in the Q&A if you have a question. Use the Q&A. So it says, Dr. Francavilla, thanks so much. Very useful information. I want to start a telemedicine obesity practice. Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think it's better to have an actual practice? This is such a great question. And my answer to this has changed over the last couple years. So there's a couple considerations. You can absolutely do a complete telehealth practice. That is entirely feasible. Within that, you have to decide if you're taking insurance at all or doing all cash. Doing a cash telehealth practice is going to have almost no overhead, so there's very little risk involved. That being said, it is going to be very important for that practice to do a lot of marketing. It is going to be harder for people to find you doing telehealth. There's also a lot in the telehealth space right now. So a few years ago, when I was consulting with people, like this was a great idea. Lots of people are doing it. We're talking about how to do it. And since then, there's been an explosion of online telehealth for obesity, right? So you will have to do a little bit more marketing of how to set yourself apart from these big companies that are doing telehealth and creating a network of referrals. So that might be getting to know physicians in your community who might refer to you and having a good referral base. That might actually involve paid marketing or really spending a lot of time growing a reputation, growing a YouTube channel or an Instagram, picking one and just growing it so you have an audience of people. Having more state licenses available is going to make it a broader amount of people who can see you. I think having some degree of a physical practice does open things up. It lets you have more treatment options. So it does become easier to use things like phentermine and other controlled substances, Vyvanse, when you have an actual practice. Though currently you can legally do all of that without having a brick and mortar. That is continuing to be a temporary extension from the DEA. So that may not continue forever if you want to use those in your practice. And as a believer in comprehensive obesity care, I think you should have access to controlled substances. So having in person, I think, can let you grow a little quicker. Now, in person, a lot of people overcomplicate. In person does not mean you need to go buy a building. It doesn't mean you need to go lease a space even. Subletting is such a great way to start. So you could sublet from another medical office. Maybe you just use their office one day a week and they charge you like $400 or $500 a month. I have doctors who I've sublet to in the past. I have one that I've sublet to for 9 years. She comes here once a week. The other option would be to depending on where you're at, some localities have rules about if you have a medical office, you have to have a sink or something. But I think that's pretty rare. I don't think that's most places. So you can sometimes just have like an office space in something like a Regis or an Office Evolution, especially for obesity medicine. We're not doing procedures, like it's more cognitive. We might be taking blood pressure, listening to heart. We don't need like a really formal exam space. That can work too if you're thinking about brick and mortar. So yes, you can absolutely do telehealth only. You are going to have more competition and you are going to have to focus more on marketing. Taking insurance is definitely a competitive advantage. So I've been a big fan of taking insurance. That's how I started my practice. I think our patients deserve that. Then I definitely swung towards advising more cash practices. There's a lot of competition in that cash space right now. And so if you are able to take insurance, if you decide to make that choice, you can definitely grow a telehealth or an in-person clinic a lot quicker. That was a long answer, but hopefully that explains like some of the thought process on how you would decide if you want to do in-person or brick and mortar. Well, looks like there's still a few of you hanging around, but I'm not seeing any other questions. Other questions in the Q&A? Are there benefits to cash/membership versus insurance? So this is a huge, huge question that you have to figure out when you're starting your practice. A lot of the clients that I've had have started with cash and then they're not as busy as they want to be and they have decided to go and start taking insurance and they've done really well. So you will be busier in the current market if you take insurance because there's so many cash opportunities at this point for weight loss. It doesn't mean you can't do it. You absolutely can, but you will probably grow quicker and more easily if you take insurance. And I can say that based on experience. So in our clinic, we kind of have a hybrid method. We have most of our doctors take a membership on top of insurance. Our nurse practitioner's insurance only, and like her panel filled really, really quickly. So you will fill your clinic more quickly if you take insurance. Cash gives you more flexibility, right? So you have a lot less rules. Membership can also be great keep in mind, most of us, when we do obesity care, do really intensive care. We spend a lot of time with our patients or offer them a lot of services. So your membership rate has to reflect the amount of work that you're doing and financially makes sense. So both can work. Follow-up question: is it difficult taking insurance? Absolutely. Taking insurance is a nightmare and is super demoralizing, if I'm being completely honest. And so that's why so many people don't do it. It makes your practice more complicated in many ways, and it restricts some of what you can do. So that is the trade-off. And that's why a lot of people like cash practices. It just depends how quickly you want to grow, how quickly you want to be busy, what population you want to serve. But insurance absolutely makes it more complicated. That being said, you find someone who does the credentialing for you. Can do the credentialing yourself. I've always found someone. Unfortunately, whoever I find for credentialing keeps going away, but there's always people out there who do credentialing. So they do all the paperwork to get you on board with insurance, and that process takes many months in most cases to get credentialed. Usually at least 3 months you'll get on most plans, and then it can take 6 to 9 months to really get credentialed with all the plans. And then billing, you want to have a system in place. Some people will do it on their own initially, but that's more, I think, for a learning process. You probably should not do your own billing long term. It's just not a good use of your time. So what I do for billing, I did have an independent biller for a long time, and she got a percent of collections. And then a few years ago, we transitioned to using billing that was integrated with our EHR. And then I have a virtual assistant who supervises the billing process, and she follows up on all the rejections, which there's many, and deals with that. And then my office manager supervises the process and follows up on that. So you can hire a company to just take care of all of that for you, and they'll usually charge between 6 to 8% of collections, or they're keeping 6 to 8%. Or you can hire someone to do the billing for you, and you'll need some billing software, which is usually a couple $100s a month, sometimes per provider, to have the billing software. So it adds it makes your life more complicated to take insurance, but it will also fill you up more quickly. And with remote patient monitoring and chronic care management codes, it can be financially feasible to take insurance in this day and age. For obesity care. So, and there's some nuance there of how to bill and all of that that we can get into in that it exists elsewhere. But insurance does make it more complicated, but you will grow much faster. And then once you figure it out and have a process, it's fine. Which EHR do you use? I use Elation. It is more designed for primary care. So if you're doing obesity only, it may be overkill. So there's a lot of different EHRs out there. I use Elation. How long do you think it can take to start up a business? So you can start a business relatively quickly. The things you like legally sort of need, you have to get usually a LLC or some other business entity. So you have to register for that or have a lawyer register. That's usually really quick. You usually need to get an NPI number for your practice. So that takes a little bit of time. You're going to need to get malpractice insurance if you don't already have one that would cover your practice. And then you need business insurance as well that's separate. Depending on where you're at and if you have employees, you also need unemployment insurance, which is a different insurance policy. So those are kind of like the things you must have to start your practice. And then you probably want an EHR and things like that. But I mean, you could have an EHR set up basically overnight. So, I mean, you could start a business within a month if you wanted to. You could definitely start a business within a month. That marketing is something you should be starting right now. That can be super simple. That can be just writing your bio, why you're passionate about obesity medicine, and just posting that on your personal places, starting a website that's just like your name or something, or you can post some basic information about yourself, but just starting to get an online presence if you're thinking about that, because getting your practice full is different than starting the practice. But I mean, I think you could have a practice up and running in a month if you were motivated to. Do you think it's worth paying a designer to make a website? I'm hearing less and less that this is necessary. So I don't like that type of stuff personally myself, but I did make my Help Your Patients Lose Weight website myself, and it looks fine. It does its job. People go there and buy what they need. Most of the other ones I have had someone make for me. Those are pretty cheap at this point in time too. You can get someone like on Fiverr or other websites, and like they're not very expensive to have someone make them. But a lot of people enjoy making it themselves and knowing how to update it. And there's so many platforms now that make it really easy to do. So I don't think you need a super fancy website. Where it's sometimes worth investing some money is for search engine optimization on the website. So making a nice looking website nowadays is pretty easy, but you want people to be able to find it and for it to have the search terms and prioritization on search engines for people to find you. So sometimes that is worth investing in. When we started growing our practice, I did pay a website designer and for someone to optimize our search engine optimization so that we would, get more of the right patients to our clinic. So, but that does not have to be super expensive. Like we're talking about maybe a couple $1,000s to do sort of basic stuff there. All right. Any other questions here? Think I answered everything that was coming in. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. If you want help starting your practice, feel free to email me at Dr. Francavilla. And then you can also, if you want to join our mastermind that starts in July, again, you can shoot me an email and we'll get you set up with that. Other question that came in is, what was the other thing you'd mentioned regarding subletting? Yeah, so subletting is an option where you just maybe rent from another medical clinic or something in the healthcare space. And then there are places, this is going to be in more urban areas, but that are shared office places. So two companies that are sort of common are Office Evolution and Regus, and that's where you can just like rent a room. That's actually how we started our practice, even in primary care for 9 months while we were building our space, was we just had one exam room with a desk and an exam table. We couldn't do any procedures in it, but we were able to do all of our consults and vitals and things in that room. And those are just called like shared office space, basically. And you rent a room usually by the month. So it's really flexible. So you can use that for a while you're kind of trying things out and while you're maybe looking for a more permanent space. Or there's some psychiatrists and stuff who will, use spaces like that long term. And that can be just like a really flexible option because you're not committing to a really long lease or anything. Well, thank you for all the thank yous. You guys are welcome. I hope that was inspiring. I think, private practice is definitely still a viable option. And again, if I can help you start yours, you know how to find me. All right, take care.